Someone around you secretly believes your emotions still belong inside their control, but your brain has already quietly changed forever. The frightening part is, they recognized your transformation before you consciously understood why their usual tactics suddenly felt completely powerless yesterday. Something invisible shifted the moment you stopped defending yourself, because silence activated a psychological response they never expected from you. Stay with me, because once you understand this hidden pattern, you will never see controlling people the same way again. Most people believe manipulators fear confrontation, yet psychology reveals they actually fear emotional independence far more than loud disagreement itself. When your brain stops rewarding their behavior with predictable reactions, their confidence quietly begins collapsing beneath invisible psychological pressure every single day. But here is where everything becomes unexpectedly interesting, because their next moves expose weaknesses they desperately try hiding from everyone around them. By the end of this video, you will recognize every hidden pattern before manipulation quietly reaches your peaceful mind ever again. The first moment their control begins collapsing. The instant your reactions become calmer, they realize their familiar emotional shortcuts no longer unlock access to your inner world anymore. Instead of feeling powerful, confusion slowly replaces certainty, because their brain suddenly loses the predictable control it depended upon every day. The most surprising part is they rarely leave immediately, because losing influence creates psychological discomfort stronger than most people ever imagine. Understanding this first invisible shift explains why their behavior suddenly changes after realizing they can no longer control your peaceful mind. Their first response often looks surprisingly friendly, because sudden kindness becomes another psychological test, instead of genuine personal growth afterward together. They smile, apologize lightly, and reopen familiar conversations, while quietly measuring whether your emotional boundaries remain consistently strong under pressure today. Many people mistake this temporary warmth for meaningful change, allowing old manipulation patterns to quietly return without immediate recognition once again. Your greatest advantage is calm consistency, because predictable boundaries gradually convince their brain that emotional control has permanently disappeared forever. When confusion turns into obsession, once easy control disappears, they begin studying your routines, because uncertainty feels deeply uncomfortable inside. An emotionally dependent, controlling personality, every day, they notice your confidence, your friendships, your quiet happiness, hoping one vulnerable moment will restore their previous emotional influence somehow again. Here is where it gets interesting, because obsession often grows strongest after manipulation completely loses its expected psychological reward over time. The healthier your emotional habits become, the harder their mind struggles to understand why familiar tactics suddenly accomplish absolutely nothing anymore. Unable to control your emotions directly, they frequently attempt controlling how other people quietly perceive your character and personal reputation instead. Stories become subtly rewritten until healthy boundaries appear selfish, while your peaceful distance becomes falsely described as unnecessary emotional cruelty everywhere today. People who truly know your consistent character usually recognize this pattern, because genuine confidence never requires endless campaigns against someone else's reputation. Protect your peace through steady actions, because consistent behavior always speaks louder than carefully crafted stories designed to confuse others eventually. The psychology of losing power. Eventually, they realize your silence is no longer temporary, because your brain has completely rewired its response to emotional manipulation forever. Without predictable reactions, their identity feels surprisingly unstable, since control was secretly the foundation supporting their emotional confidence for years. Instead of accepting responsibility, many search for another opportunity, believing one emotional mistake might restore their familiar psychological advantage again, someday. But the scary part is genuine inner peace quietly removes the reward their controlling behavior always depended upon for emotional satisfaction. This is exactly why protecting your emotional boundaries matters, because every calm decision strengthens healthier neural pathways inside your developing resilient brain daily. Instead of forcing motivation, your brain needs small systems that compound quietly over time. The philosophy behind quiet growth. Every day, each peaceful response teaches your mind that self-respect creates lasting emotional security, far better than approval from controlling personalities ever could. The stronger your inner stability becomes, the weaker manipulation appears, until unhealthy relationships naturally lose their psychological influence over you completely. Your peace becomes your greatest strength. Remember, the real victory never comes from defeating another person, because lasting freedom begins with mastering your own emotional reactions completely instead. People may continue testing old patterns, but your calm responses quietly remind them their previous influence no longer exists within your life. Every healthy boundary reinforces the truth that emotional strength grows through consistent choices rather than dramatic confrontations or perfect, clever responses alone. Once your brain embraces peaceful confidence, manipulation becomes easier to recognize, before unnecessary emotional damage ever quietly begins again. Today, you discovered why controlling people psychologically change after realizing your emotional reactions no longer belong under their influence anymore, permanently. Together, the greatest lesson is simple, because your calm mind becomes strongest exactly where your desperate need for approval quietly, finally ends. Forever. This week, practice one respectful boundary, observe every reaction carefully, and trust consistent behavior more than emotional promises from anyone around you. Because once your brain chooses lasting self-respect over fear, your peace becomes the one thing manipulation can never successfully steal again.